Starting off, I'd like to introduce to you today the connection between leadership and influence, because they are different, but they do work together. Oftentimes these words are interchanged, but they are very different in practicality. I believe we should understand the terms so we may better understand which of those roles is right for us. Everyone has a place when it comes to roles in affecting others for change. Leadership can be simply defined as leading a group of people or an organization. Influence can be simply defined as having the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone. Here's why I think it's wrong to interchange those two words. Everyone has the capacity to have an effect on a group of people, but not everyone has the capacity to lead a group of people. This doesn't make natural-born leaders any more special, and believing that lie is often the downfall of many natural-born leaders. The role of the local influencer and the leader are equally important and equally difficult. Just simply displaying a bad attitude at school or in the workplace will influence the character, development, and behavior of those around you, whether you like it or not, as will a good attitude. Using the word in a broad sense, influencing others is less of a conscious choice than leading others. Leading is an act that must be carried out. An act requires action. All that influence requires is your existence. Well, if everyone has the capacity to influence, then it must be super important. Well, yeah, it is. We all have the capacity to control our behavior to some extent. We have a responsibility, since influence is less of a conscious choice, to watch how we are influencing others. If you want to see certain principles lived out by your leaders, then you would do best to live out those principles on your own first, influencing those around you. Those around you will most definitely notice a difference in you. However, many times, you won't always notice the difference you are making, and that's the nature of influence. It just happens. Like I said earlier, a bad attitude can affect those around you. If you don't notice the difference you are making with the influence, how do you prevent your influence from souring or souring your community? If you are submitting to influences that are good, and you keep those good influences on the forefront of your mind, then the influence that naturally comes from you will be good. This may end up bringing in new converts or changing people's minds. It's very effective. It is important that we carefully watch the type of influences that make their way into our lives, because our minds can be changed, even for the worse. We should protect against any influences that may sour our own influences. The biggest responsibility of the local influencer is self-government. Carefully take precautions as to not be influenced in ways that would compromise your good principles. Be sure you are never an influence that someone may feel the need to protect themselves against. What makes leadership any different from influence? Influence is affecting people horizontally and involuntarily, while leadership is affecting people vertically and it's more top-down. So why do people group together under this structure in the first place? If leadership is defined as to lead a movement or a group of people, then I would say leadership, the goal of it is to accomplish a goal, to get something done. That's why people organize into groups under leaders. While leading a group of people to a goal, you are influencing them in a specific direction. However, in leadership, many times the leader is voicing the consensus of the people following. Many of the people would go in that general direction anyways without a leader. They unite under a leader because they hold those same views. This is not to say the influence of a leader is worthless or unnecessary. It is definitely a very important part of a movement. A good leader will refine the general consensus on the idea of the people following to ideas that are more specific, targeted, and goal-orientated. A movement's going to fail unless it knows where it's going and how it's going to get there. A leader acts as a spearhead for a movement or a cause. A spearhead, as we know, breaks the wind in front of it so that the pole following it will have a clearer and more precise path to its destination. This is the job and the role of a leader, to refine the path ahead for the movement behind them and to make an impact. Leaders work to refine the dialectic of the followers, and the local influences that follow are the ones that go out and recruit new people just by living their everyday lives in accordance to those principles that they believe in. Kind of broad in general, but I felt that defining these terms would be the best way to start this off. So I hope I've left you with a better understanding of the way that everyday influence and leadership work together. Thank you. I'm going to pass it off to the one and only Jack Pruitt.
Thanks, Kenyon. So I'm going to talk about this over leadership, and so I'm going to apply leadership with overcoming trials, and just how that goes together. So first off, trials and difficulties, they're a part of life. and that's just a fact. The thing is, they're not necessarily bad. And so I basically have 3 points. The first one is that Satan is out to get godly leaders. Like, that's his goal. And, like, you can see this all over the Bible. Like, first off, like with Job, like, he was sort of a leader with this group of friends that he's in, like his family and the people around him. Like, he made sure that everyone was doing right. And then Satan saw that, and he went out for Job and, like, took away everything he had and all this. But God ended up using that to glorify him. So, and then, like, Nehemiah, he was also a leader with the Israelites and just helped them get back together and stuff. And then, but, like, during his life, Satan was trying to destroy him. Like, he had enemies from all sides. And, like, everyone was threatening him and just trying to attack him. And then also Paul, Paul, before he became a Christian, he was, like, he's doing great in worldly standards. He's, like, a high priest person, and, like, everything's going well. And then all of a sudden he becomes a Christian, and it's, like, just everything, like, bad starts happening. Like, everywhere he goes, people start persecuting him, and he has persecution, like, everywhere he goes. And so my second point is we can grow through trials. And James 1, 2, and 3 says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness." And so I think this is one thing that Salt and Light does pretty good at, is just preparing us as leaders, just to, like, preparing us to be ready for trials and difficulties. And they just, like, have us ready and prepared for everything. And so in my own life, an application of just growing from trials is, like, one thing for basketball. Like, for me, I love to win, and it's always fun stuff. But it always seems like every year that I end up growing the most in, like, different areas, but especially in basketball, where, like, after losses or something, and that's, like, whether it's just motivating me and the team or if it's just, like, inside or something, it always seems that, like, it's from the losses that ends up growing the most. So my third point is just a couple challenges for growing in leadership, and it's something that just you can be working on, and me, that I need to work on. And one thing is just to remember that God's with us during all trials, and that just he won't leave us. And then also, just if we remember that, like, what Christ went through, it'll sort of help us through our own trials, and just to know that someone else went through, like, death and persecution, suffering for me, and just whenever we're in trials, just to think about that, and that should help us get through. And then also, it's a big part of this next point, and this I think is what AJ is talking about mostly next, and it's just accepting challenges as a leader, and just not always trying to avoid them, since, like, I don't usually try to look to go do hard things or whatever, but I know that's where God grows us. And sort of like in Salt and Light, for me, I'm just a part of Salt and Light just to be a part. I just, like, go through all the routine stuff, but especially in the beginning years, I didn't really get much out of it. I was just sort of a part of this group. But then whenever I actually started, like, going to, like, OU and talking about abortion and all that stuff, that's whenever I actually started, like, becoming more of a leader, I guess, and just, like, you don't really get stuff out of it until you start doing the hard things that God wants. And so just remember that in leadership, there will always be trials, and that they can have a good purpose for them. So, thank you. And then, AJ? Yeah.
So when Caleb, like, first asked me to come speak or whatever, he sent me a text, but the text was, like, addressed to Levi. And I was like, "Oh, hey, dude, lol, wrong person. This is meant for Levi." And then he was like, "Oh no, my bad. That text is actually meant for you." And I just accidentally put Levi's name, and I was like, "Wait, what? You meant that for me?" I was like, "Oh, okay, I can speak on it." And, like, that's the downfall of many potential leaders. They were given the opportunity and influence to lead, but they neglect their role as a leader and ignore any opportunity to lead. They just completely shirk their responsibilities. They would rather take the easy road and follow someone else, let someone else lead, let someone else take charge. And that's a very common mentality I see in people, even in myself sometimes. If you're given the opportunity to lead, then stink and take it. Don't be afraid to fail. You will fail and you will mess up, but that's how you learn. That's how you're going to get better as a leader. You must be confident in how you lead. But a leader, he's got to take action first, right? Because if a leader's trying to lead and he's just telling people what to do and he's not doing it, then what kind of example is there to follow? You have to do it yourself. If you're alone when you do it, then fine, so be it. Other people will come and join you. Someone's bound to come along and help you. Don't allow yourself to be a sheep and follow the flock and just stand by and watch people. Now that you've taken the opportunity to lead and you have a few people following you, what next? You got to care for them. You got to care for your people that are following you. You must show interest in them. You got to invest in their lives. They're not robots for you just to control or just tell them what to do. This is kind of like where I mess up as a leader a lot, because I just ignore the fact that like someone's actually a person and that they're a human being. I just get so goal-oriented. I just start commanding people to do stuff. Well, I'm helping them, but I don't like have any reason for like what they're saying or what they're thinking. An example of this was in the leader treks when they came to speak to us. We were playing our game, and we were all like walking back to discuss like how we were going to do things. And someone came up to me with an idea, and they told it to me, and I just kind of walked by and dismissed it. It's like, oh, no, I have a better idea. But that's crushing to a person. Just say your idea and want to be heard, but be completely ignored. A solution to this I have found is, well, wait till everyone is like gathered around you, and then just have everyone go around and say, is there any ideas? Does anyone have any ideas? And just wait for everyone to say their ideas and go around. And don't say yes or no as you go around asking for ideas for each one. But at the end, come together and say, okay, what's the best idea here, guys? You want to make sure everybody's heard. They've got to feel like they're like a part of it, like they have a purpose. And lastly, you must encourage them. You're the leader. You're the one that's supposed to be the guidance to everybody else. And if you're not hyped for it, if you're not energetic about it, your followers will not be either. A little word of encouragement will always go a long way when working on something hard or something easy. Everyone likes being told they're doing a good job or to keep going or whatever. You have to remind them of the goal. They can't just just keep working like with no goal in mind, just working senselessly. You have to remind them and encourage them. So stand out and actually lead and take the opportunity, and don't shirk away from your responsibilities. Lead by example, care for your followers, and encourage them. Thanks. Levi Penwell's next.
Hey guys. So Caleb texted me and asked me to talk about leading specifically in student government. So I'm going to give you guys some ideas that I had and some practical steps that you can take to be a better leader. And it applies to leading in student government, but also I like to think that it applies, in other areas of leading also. So we'll start with the hard stuff, the challenges. I would say the biggest challenge that I've had as a class president or in student government, really in leadership in general, the biggest challenge that I've had is staying organized. Because lots of times when you're at the top and you're the leader, it's like all the information funnels through you. And so I got like senior retreat this, and then graduation that, and Boston trip this, and then there's a fun lunch today, and I got homework to do, and it's like, you're drowning. Like, what do you even do? So the solution to that is to stay organized and make a plan, and especially for your followers, because they'll have a better time following you and getting the work done if you've got this gets done this day, this gets done this day, steps, and so on and so forth. And I used to be really, really bad at that, and now I'm only kind of sort of bad at that. So I've improved a little bit, but it's definitely my area that I'm working on. As far as growth in leadership, the biggest area that I've grown as a leader from when I started off in student government, I would say is relating to other people. Because in junior high and even up to freshman, sophomore year, it's like I had this mentality. I was kind of a shy person, I had this mentality of like, I'm just going to like stay in my area and like do my leadership work, and like I'll get my stuff done. And whenever I get my stuff done, then everything will be okay because I did my part, and I won't have to do anything extra or talk to anybody or any of that scary kind of stuff. Nothing like this. Never would have done anything like this. And so it was like I formed myself this little leadership cubicle, you know? Like whenever Mr. Incredible's like crammed in his little office, that was me. And so what I've realized as I've grown in my leadership and as I've practiced is that every now and then as a leader, you have to get up in front of everybody and talk on a microphone. And it's pretty scary. But the more you practice it, you know, the better you get at it. And it's really a useful tool to be able to relate to people, because when you're the leader and you're at the front, you know, you're kind of like a tip of the spear on a project or whatever. Most of the time, you're the one who's got to say, hey, Vice President, let's do blah, 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 blah. Or go talk to this class sponsor about this. Or maybe even go talk to like a parent or something, you know? And so the better that you are about talking to people and relating with other people, the better leader that you'll become. Because you're personable, you know? And people would rather follow someone who's personable than just like, you know, this statue that sits there and does leadership stuff. So at this point, maybe you're thinking, okay, well, that sounds like a lot, you know, Levi. I'm sure maybe you're really good at it, but I don't think I would be good at it. Why would I even try? Why even lead? Well, hypothetical person, I'm so glad that you asked that question. Whenever I started leading, it was just like, let's try this out and see if I'm any good at it. And then I survived, so I kept doing it, you know, and tried again. But it's grown into really more than that. And I would say kind of at the core of why I lead, and it's I think this is true for lots of good leaders also. You lead for the followers, you know? You do it for the people, because leadership involves the least amount of credit and the most amount of work most of the time. So in order to be able to handle that, you've got to really care about the people that you're doing it for. And this is where I'm at with the people, you know, they're not really under me, but my followers, I guess you could say. And it's like when it clicks, like whenever you've been planning something, you know, as a leader, and then people are on the senior retreat and you put this work in, and then you see that people are having fun, and it's like, I did something and it actually worked, you know, and nothing is caught on fire yet. And like whenever that happens, and you see that you've impacted somebody's life in that way, or that you've impacted a group of people's lives, especially in the positive way, it's like that like makes it all worth it for me. And I would encourage you guys to grow in that feeling, to become leaders. And so my last thing that I'm going to kind of leave you with is just some encouragement, some practical application, I guess you could say, how to grow. How do you become a better leader? Well, the first and probably simplest way to apply this, AJ kind of already mentioned it, is you just, you got to do it, you know? And you get better at it by doing it and practicing it. And the biggest component there is no fear. You know, you can't be afraid to fail, because then you just won't do it. You got to be the person who, and sometimes you have to force yourself into it, but you got to be the person who raises your hand and you're like, yeah, I can do that. I can, you know, help plan Miss Bauer's birthday party or whatever it happens to be. I understand my examples are ridiculous. But, and so the more that you do that, the more that you practice it, like I've been saying, it gets easier eventually. And the second, and I would maybe even say more important application that I have for you guys is, you know, if you want to learn to like speak Spanish, then you got to hang around people who speak Spanish all the time. And the same thing goes for leadership. If you want to be a better leader and grow in your leadership, then you got to hang around and talk to, ask questions to people who you know are good leaders. Maybe it's, you know, somebody in your class or in your family, and they stick out to you as a leader. On top of that, definitely teachers here at CHA and your class sponsors, because lots of them have, you know, all kinds of leadership experience because they've been at it for several years. So they're pretty good at it by now. So the more that you go and talk to those people about, so I'm trying to head up this group, I'm trying to lead here in this area, but I came up against this problem. How do I fix that? Odds are they'll have at least some good advice, if not the actual solution to help you solve that. And so the more that you open yourself up to them, the more that you open yourself up to them and are ready and willing to help and practice that leadership, the better leader you will be. So that's all that I have for you guys today. And last but not least is the one, the only, Caleb Tinker.
All right, so I'm going to cover more what the Bible says about influence and leadership, because we know how to lead, or at least we know how we can learn to lead. We're surrounded by people at CHA, the teachers, pastors, our parents, who all know how to lead and can show us how to lead. But what does the Bible say about the people we should follow and should look for examples? So first things first, maybe, if this will work. There you go. Okay, that's the definition of influence, and Kenyon already touched on that. But the action or process of producing effects on the actions, behaviors, opinions, etc. of another. Basically, that's a big, long, fancy way of saying the ability to produce change. Okay, so what kind of influences should we follow? Who should be influencing us? So the Bible has a couple things to say about this. If I can, there you go. Okay, so first is Proverbs 12:26. One who is righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. Second, 1 Corinthians 15:33 is, do not be deceived, bad company corrupts good morals, and we're all familiar with that verse. Proverbs 22:24 and 25, make no friendship with man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare. That speaks specifically to following someone who is not angry, but it can be applied to other aspects of leadership as well. And then finally, Proverbs 13:20, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. And Levi already touched on this. If you want to be a good leader, you surround yourself with good leaders, and you look to them. All right, so things to consider, that those verses, and there are many others throughout the Bible, and I encourage you to go look. It's better than what I can say in 5 minutes up here. Who is influencing you? Are the people around you pointing you towards God? Are they challenging you to live a life that is good and pleasing to the Lord? And what is influencing you? Is the kind of music you listen to, or is what you're saying or doing, the movies you watch, are those making you go closer to the Lord, or are they pulling you away from Him? Very few things have a neutral influence. So I encourage you to look at what is influencing you. And finally, who are you influencing? We don't often think about who we're influencing, but can the people around you look at you and say, I can follow that person. That's a good Christian leader. I can, I'm nervous, so if I have like a heart attack or something, just bear with me. Okay, but can the people around you follow your example? And a good example of this is the church at Philippi. And there are a lot of examples in the Bible, so it's kind of odd that I would pick this one. But Paul's writing to the church, and he says, I thank God in my every remembrance of you. Think about that. What kind of people were they? I thank God in my every remembrance of you. In my memories, every time I think about you, I thank God that I know you. What kind of people were those people that he would thank God every time he thought of them? What kind of people are they in your life? Like you can probably think of some. There's probably half a dozen to a dozen people in this room that I could say that about. But are you the kind of person who, when someone thinks of you, they thank God that they know you? Are you that type of a leader? All right, but the question we often face is, what can I do? So we want to be good leaders, and we can learn to be good leaders, and no one wants to be a bad leader. That's not what anyone wants. But oftentimes the question we face is, what can I do? Like, for instance, we go through a discussion on moral purity on our senior year, and one of the reasons you go through that is to help other people be morally pure and stay morally pure. But people don't care about moral purity. So what can I do? If they don't even care about it, what can I do? And a good example of this, the best I found, is every year the Salt and Light group goes out with Justice for All to talk about abortion with different campuses. And I would venture to say every student in Salt and Light thinks that abortion is wrong, or most students do. And if they really believe it's wrong, why would they not go out and talk to people? I would say it's because they don't think they can do anything. And you go out every year, I go out every year with Salt and Light as many days as they'll let me, and I talk with people. And the first year when I went out, it was, like, okay, I'll learn better next year. I'll have better conversations next year. Because, you have one or two good conversations, but the other half a dozen or so you had, no one changed their mind. It's just you talk to them. And so you go out the second year, and kind of the same things happen when you say, well, okay, well, next year. And then you go out for your third year, and you see the same people you talked to last year, and you talk to some of them, and they haven't changed their mind. There's no visible change in the way they think. Have you really had any influence? Or is it just beating your head against a wall? Are you doing any good? And actually, when I went out this last year with Justice for All, I met a guy. He wasn't yelling and screaming at me, so it was like, hey, this is a good conversation. And then, we talked, and he was real friendly, and we're just talking. And come to find out, he thinks a lot of the same things I do. He thinks abortion is wrong. He thinks, and his worldview is kind of the same. But then he put a question to me that has to do with this. It's like, I used to get all passionate about it and get worked up and, talk with my friends, but nothing happened. And that's where I feel like a lot of us are, is we would lead, but why would we lead? Nothing's happening. And so I told him a story, and I hope this will be beneficial to y'all, about a guy named Parker Denton, okay? He graduated from CHA in 2013, went to OBU. He's a normal guy, hangs out with his girlfriend, rides his motorcycle. He doesn't really do anything big. He's just a guy. And so, after a couple of years, he moves into a house there near campus at OBU. And he moves in with about 4 other guys, and, them, all their girlfriends, about a dozen people or so. There's a real tight-knit, close group. They're all together almost all the time. So Parker decides to see what kind of influence he has. And why he did this, I don't know. You'd have to ask him. But to do this, to see how he's affecting those around him, he does one simple thing. He uses the word super, okay? And he uses it in ways that aren't quite correct, but that are not incorrect either. So instead of just saying, I'm late, he'll say, I'm super late. Or instead of saying, I need this, he'll say, I super need this. Okay? At first, nothing is happening. And then one by one, all the people around that house, took months, all the people around that house start using the word super. Okay, so we found the circle of Parker's influence. Half a dozen people or so. Big whoop. He's doing a lot of good. Well, it doesn't end there. My brother Andrew lived with him, and he moves back to Moore and goes to work at the Chick-fil-A in Moore. Okay, because that's where Tinkers work. It's the greatest place to work, just saying. Okay. But so Andrew goes back, works at Chick-fil-A, and there's about 96 employees at Chick-fil-A at this point. And he's using the word super like he did with Parker, and he knows what Parker did now, but he just uses it anyway. And one by one, everyone at that store, people from all different sorts of backgrounds, okay? We're talking people who can't speak English, at all. We're talking people who, taught English. We're talking about teenagers, old people, middle age, male, female, everyone, one by one, they all start saying the word super and using it in that same way that Parker did. They don't even know Parker exists. And that's a kind of stupid illustration, but if you can affect that much change with one word that you say, imagine if you lived your life pointing towards Christ 24/7. What kind of change would you have? If I can get this to change. There you go. So 2 things to remember that we get from the story of Parker. What we do now has a lasting impact on our family, our friends, and our church, and fill in the blank. Your team, your work, whatever it is. It may not seem like it has an influence, but little by little, these things add up. And it may take a while, it may take years, but it has a difference. Okay? And the outcome is not up to us. So these are the 2 verses that I chose to illustrate this, and there's many, many more. And really reading these chapters, I would highly recommend. And Jesus answered them, "Truly I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt, you will not only do what has been done to the fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, it will happen. And whatever you ask in prayer, you will receive if you have faith." That's Matthew 21. And then Mark 11, "Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe you have received it, and it will be yours." Now that's not talking about ask for whatever you want. So if I'm asked for $1 million and a pretty girlfriend, probably not going to get it, okay? Believe me, I've tried, okay? Okay, I actually haven't, okay? That was just a joke, not that desperate. Okay, but whatever you ask in God's will, He will do. We're guaranteed that. That's a promise from Scripture. He will give you the strength, He will give you the skills, He will put the people in place for you to accomplish that. And it may take a while, like we covered earlier, but He will do it in His own time and His own fashion. All right, so how we're going to close today is, like that says, we're going to pray and ask God to use us. We're going to pray that we would be good influences on people, that we would know to follow good influences, and that really we would just seek to serve the Lord. Okay, so y'all are going to pray, and I want you to pray for yourself and the person on your right, person on your left, the person in front, and the person behind. Then I'll close this out in prayer, and then Mr. Clay, I'll hand it off to Mr. Clay. Okay? All right, we'll take a little bit longer, and then I'll close this out. All right, Lord Jesus, thank you for this day, and thank you that the good influences we have at CHA, our teachers, our pastors, our parents, the administration, thank you that we are surrounded by people who exude leadership, and help us to seek to model that, Lord. I pray that we would take the opportunities, like AJ was talking about, I pray that we would take the opportunities we have to lead and learn to lead well in that. I pray that you would give us opportunities and that you'd give us courage to do it. Because what we can do is limited to what we will do, Lord, and help us to know that. In Jesus' name, amen.